Hey guys, it's Kevin again, this review for Justified, Season 6, Episode 11, Fugitive number 1, and this episode, holy shit, this episode was amazing. Sad thing about this episode is that you can already tell that things are starting to come to an end. There are 3 episodes left, 2 episodes after this, and I can't tell you guys how much I don't want this show to end. Like, seriously, I'm loving it more and more every week, and this was, as I said, by far best episode of the season. Let's just get into it because it was amazing. So we start off with Rachel. She's making calls because, of course, to help find Ava, because now Ava is now the number 1 fugitive, which why the episode is called Fugitive number 1. Ava's like their main target now, basically, and she says that she's a new target, and Art comes in dressed for work and heads into his office, and Rachel asks how bad it is, and he says he's shaved, and he says the director called, and he tried to take the heat, but Rachel already told them she authorized Ava as a CI, and she asks if she's suspended, and he says, hell no. Art says she got Boyd Crowder, something he has never done, which is something they've always wanted to do, is to get Boyd Crowder. And Rachel did that, and I love that Art said that she did that, because she did do that. And it wasn't Raylan that did that was Rachel that did that. The doctor tells Boyd that he is a medical miracle, and we see that Raylan, after Boyd was shot, he drove Boyd to the hospital. And of course, I said I didn't really know what was going to happen next. And now we see what happens next. Because Raylan has to talk to him alone. The doc asks if he's the one who shot him. And Raylan says he's the one who saved him, brought him there. And Boyd says he handcuffed him to a bumper, called 911 and left. And Raylan says he could hear the sirens as he left. And he says he found the truck abandoned and no sign of Ava. And Raylan says it had to be hard to be so close to have it shot out of his hand. And Boyd says he has no idea how he feels and says Raylan is only disappointed because he didn't get to shoot him. And Raylan asks where she'll go, and Boyd says to take him out of there and he'll take him to her. And Boyd says he thinks he'll get out of there and will go get his money. Raylan asks how long he thinks Ava has with Avery after her, and Raylan says there's no telling what they'll do to her. And Boyd says maybe that's what she has coming. And Raylan asks if he's cool with him dishing out that sort of retribution on her, and Boyd says Zachariah, her uncle, is the man she's looking for. Boyd says if Zachariah isn't dead in a mine shaft, he is, and which is true, because Zachariah is after Boyd, and I like the question that Boyd asks Raylan, is that what has he always been after, the money or Ava? And I like that Raylan doesn't really give him a definitive answer, because the reason that he's after Boyd is just because he's done so many things that he needs to be brought to justice. I mean, even though we're rooting for Boyd, he needs to be brought to justice. That's really what needs to happen here. And Raylan takes off and tells Tim and Nelson what he said, and he says he's going to the mine, and Nelson says he's been to Mordor, but not through the mine, and Raylan doesn't get it, and Ava and Zachariah, that's exactly where Ava's gone. She's gone to see Zachariah. They're up on a mountain dragging the money behind them, and he says it's a closed supply station for trapped miners, and they finally make it to the rescue station. They drag the money inside there. He says he'll get some heat going. He has a radio too, and says they'll know before they're coming, and says they need to be ready to hightail it. He says he's going to get an ATV running from them. She says they're going to groups, but worries that Boyd will warn the marshals since he knows Groobs, and Zachariah says that the marshals have Boyd and not to worry about it. And Catherine talks to, and I thought that was a really good overall, because of course, Ava's, obviously she's worried that Boyd's going to come after them, but I like that Zachariah says that, no, they have Boyd, they're fine, and I like seeing that Zachariah is protective of Ava and everything, but of course I want Boyd to be okay, but we know how protective Zachariah is. So Catherine talks to Mike and Wynn has to talk to her, and I'm going to call him Mike because we find in this episode he doesn't like to be called Mikey, so she says to keep Wynn there, and she says she's on the way. She finds Avery waiting in her room. She says they kept her all night for questioning. She says he needs to know about a phone call she just had. She says Wynn killed Grady. He says he didn't know he was alive and asks how she knows. She says his bodyguard called her, and she says she was a rat back then and a rat now. And Avery grabs her purse from her. He says she was a prize for him, but thinks maybe he was just a mark to her. And she says at first, yes, but then it all came flooding back. She says, was it not the same for him? He says he loves her but doesn't trust her, and she says it wouldn't be so bad for them to be together, not trusting each other like everyone else in the world does, and it is kind of true what she says. I mean, for example, Boyd and Ava are together, they don't exactly trust each other, but they're still together, and Avery says he knows her drive to avenge Grady's death even when she thought it was him. He says he hopes when he's her husband, she'd do the same for him. And she asks him to join her in the shower, but he says there's work to be done. And she asks if he's going after his $10 million, and he says it's theirs. He says he's going to make sure Boyd doesn't breathe another day. She says she'll do the same to Wynn. He says he'll bring her Wynn's head for a wedding present, and Wynn waits and tries to bargain with Mike. So you know she's going after Wynn, and you know she's telling the truth now to Avery. So basically, Wynn offers to drive sometimes and let him choose the TV channel. He asks what Mike wants, and Mike's just. This is honestly a very weird scene. Mike's listening to classical music. He's not listening to him, probably because he wants nothing to do with him. And Wynn keeps talking, and Mike turns the radio up, and Wynn threatens him, and Mike punches him. And I love what he says to Wynn. He says that Wynn was the closest to family he had and believed in him. He says he's a rat, and rats get exterminated. He tells him to quit calling him Mikey because he doesn't like being called Mikey. And that honestly was a really awesome scene to see. I did realize though that they're focusing a lot on Mike in this episode, and there's a reason why. We'll get to that, but we then see Loretta. She finds Boone in her truck. He has her gun and says he's there to keep her safe. He tells her he had a bunch of angry foster fathers growing up. He says he hears tales about all this money she supposedly has, but says Avery has a lot more. He asks if she's ever watched the History Channel, and he says back then marriages were about alliances. And she says she has no idea what he's talking about. And Boone says she can tuck in with them. He says they can watch her back, and she says she doesn't need that, least of all him. He tells her she has fire in her belly and not to let it burn to her brain. He talks like Boyd. He's basically talking sort of like Boyd Crowder, honestly. Like, the way he's talking to her is like Boyd, and I thought that was a really good scene overall. So Raylan's at the mines with Tim, and Wiltis asks if Ava could have gone into the mine on her own, because they don't know where she is, if you remember. Think about it. They don't know where she is. We know where she is, but they don't. So Raylan spots a cabin up in the mountain, and Earl and Carl go talk to the guy in the cell, wondering who narked them out, and he says he thinks that it was Catherine that did it. And Birch tells them that they're all moving to a new cell, and he tells Earl and Carl that they have a visitor, and they freak when it's Boone and Avery. And Boone flashes his gun, and Avery says he knows they were just pawns, even though they say they're soldiers, and Avery says he sent them after the armored car while he kidnapped Catherine and extorted the money. And Carl talks about how he doesn't believe it, and Avery says he'll get Carl out and has to go kill Boyd, and Carl doesn't want to do it. But Avery says if he falls or runs off, Boone will kill Earl, and yeah, that's true, that is what Boone will do. And Raylan, Tim, and some others creep up on the rescue station. They roll up inside, but no one is there. So they're basically forcing them to work with them. I mean, they're basically saying that if you don't work with us, Boone and Avery are going after you, and they're going to kill you, and yeah, it is honestly really smart what they're doing, so I like that. So Tim says someone was there, and Raylan says kids probably come in there, but then they notice the heat, and Tim says they see drag marks, and Raylan says they're not far, moving fast. He calls for choppers and dogs, and then we see Wiltis. He asks if he wants to ride along a chopper, and Raylan says definitely, and then Vasquez says this honestly was an amazing scene. Vasquez talks about how the CI deal can end his career, and Rachel's he wants Raylan, but Art says he's working the fugitive case, and Vasquez asks if he promised him a cut, then says Raylan banging Ava ruined a case against Boyd in the past. He says Raylan likes to shoot, but didn't shoot Boyd or Ava this time, and Art sides of Vasquez, but he says they need to come to grips with the fact that Ava and Raylan are boyfriend and girlfriend and stole $10 million, and I like that he said that, because honestly, that is what caused this. And Raylan takes a call from Art, and I pretty much kind of know how the show's going to end now. I kind of feel like Raylan's just going to lose his job, and he's going to have to start over, and I do agree with Vasquez that this all is over Raylan being with Ava, and that's how this all started. So Raylan takes a call from Art, who says he has to come back to Lexington now. Art says he has to come back to the office now and asks about Art's tone. He says Vasquez has raised a concern, and Raylan has if it's an accusation. And I love that Raylan's just like, there's a helicopter over me, I can't talk, there's a helicopter over me. It was really funny, and I thought that was really good. So Art fills him in, and Raylan says that's horseshit, that everything that Vasquez is saying is complete bullshit, and he should not listen to him. And Raylan says they're close and asks for one pass on the helicopter. Art says to get his ass back to Lexington right now. Raylan gets in his car, drives away. He's not going, you can tell he's not going back. That's not his concern. Him going back to Lexington is pretty much the least of his worries. Even though he wants to go back, he doesn't really care. So Ava and Zachariah are in the woods hiding from the chopper at the hospital. A cop named Stiles comes and tells Nelson that Raylan is there to talk to him, and Nelson says to keep an eye on Boyd, and Stiles lets Carl in a stairwell entrance, and Stiles says to make it look good, and Carl pistol whips him, then puts the gun on Boyd, asks where the money is, tells him to stop lying. Boyd says he's sorry, he made a bad decision. He cocks the gun. Boyd says he saved his life in the mine, and Carl then tells him that Avery has his brother, and he has no choice. Boyd says to get him out. They'll take the money, get to Earl, and Boyd says they can change their luck and says he cares about him and Earl. He tells Carl $5 million. He tells Carl to go get to the cuffs, and Nelson heads outside and doesn't see Raylan, pulls his gun, runs back inside. Boyd is in Styles' uniform. They wonder how to get him out. Carl asks how they can get him out, and Boyd says it will be easy with all the chaos. Carl asks what chaos, and I'm like, what is he talking about? Boyd just kills Carl right there, walks out, shouting there's a shooter on the floor. Everyone runs screaming. It's honestly pretty awesome what he does. He steals the cop's uniform. He's now pretending to be a cop, and it was honestly really awesome. He walks down the stairs while Nelson comes in the other way, and at the hospital, Raylan asks Tim where Nelson is. And Tim asks why Raylan isn't in Lexington, because that's where he should be, and he says he had to reframe his priorities now. Boyd is loose. And Tim says he needs to go to Lexington. And the whole time, Tim's just like, you have to go to Lexington. The whole episode, people are telling him this. You have to go to Lexington. You have to go. But you can see that he's not going to Lexington. So Raylan says there is an on version of this conversation that ends with him going to the office. There's no version of this conversation that ends with him going to the office. He's not going back there, and he's focusing on Boyd. That's what he wants to do now. He's focusing on this, and they're not going to get him to stop. So even if Art wants him to stop, he's not going to stop. So Tim asks if Raylan is going to cut him in on the $10 million, and Raylan stomps away. He's pissed at what they keep talking about, and Boone comes and tells Avery that Carl is dead and Boyd is loose, and Avery tells Boone he warned Carl and says deal is a deal, and he tells Boone to call the jail and get Earl released. And Raylan shows up to the jail looking for Earl. Earl's brought out in cuffs, and the deputy says he can't just walk out with him. Raylan flashes his badge and says this says he can. Raylan says what iterates him is when a dirty cop gets defensive when he's been caught at it, and Raylan says he can see him doing the math, but says his fellow cop is in the hospital with a brain bleed, and the cop says again that Earl has been bonded out, and Earl is slow on the uptake, then says his brother's dead, and I honestly felt bad for Earl. I really did. I mean, it was his only brother. He died, and you really do feel bad for him. And Raylan offers to give the cop his teeth. He then tells Earl to step away from the dirty cop and come with him nice and slow, and Earl goes with Raylan. So Catherine goes to the RV and asks for his gun until the mess is over. He hands it over. She lays it on the kitchen sink, then tells Wynn that Avery wanted to give her his murderous head in a platter for their wedding, and she says she thought she'd give it him to Avery, and he asks if she'll put it in a big blue Tiffany box, and he says he had to kill Simon Poole before he ratted him to Grady, and she asks why he killed Grady, and he asks why she cares since she was sleeping with Avery, and Catherine says Grady was her husband and partner, and she says you protect and avenge them from people who would betray them, and she says she believes that firmly. She pulls a gun, asks if he wants front or back of the head, and Mikey steps between them and says he would have to avenge him if she killed him, and this scene was amazing. I did not expect what happened in this scene to happen. She's shooting him, they're struggling, and you're realizing this is like the biggest, I mean, Justified's so slow paced that when a fight happens, it's awesome, and it paid off so well here. She's shooting him, they're struggling, even though Michael's been on the, even though Mike's been on shot a few times, he keeps grappling with her. He has her down the table. Wynn screams Mike's name, and Mike crushes Catherine's Trigria, and basically he kills Catherine, and Mike falls on the floor. Wynn goes to him. Mike asks him to hold him, and he does, while the poor guy bleeds out, and Mike is dead. So Mike and Catherine died, and so did Carl, and it's really sad because it's just showing that things are ending. And I understand that they need to end things, but it was really sad to see. I mean, after everything we saw, it's really the ending, and I just can't believe that it's ending. I really can't. So Mike falls on the floor, and basically that's what happened there. So Duffy's then uncuffed since Mike tossed him the keys, and he takes the phone from Mike's jacket, makes a call. He calls 911. He says he's not sure where to start, and it's true. I mean, what really do you say to that? If I were to make that call, I'd probably be like Wynn. I wouldn't really know what to say. So he stares at Catherine's bloody ring, and Raylan comes to see Avery at the pizza place. Boone is there, and Raylan says it's a nice hat, then asks if he took it off the dude at the diner. And Boone says that one smelled like patchouli and scared hipster, and Raylan says the hat's nice, and the only thing he likes about him, and he tells Boone to get out of his way. Boone faces off, taps his gun. He says this is his favorite part. He says you can hear a pin drop, and Avery tells Boone to can it, and Boone tells Raylan his balls are so blue now that they're purple. And Rand says he has Earl and says he can tell it if the judge, and that will be enough to put Avery away for good. And he tells him to leave off chasing the money or the lady he stole it from. And Avery says he's feeling at home and is putting down roots with his lady friends as they're going to own this town. What he doesn't realize, though, is that Catherine's dead. And I like that Braylon tells him straight out that Catherine died as a half an hour ago. And he says it went pretty badly in a motor coach owned by Wynn Duffy. He tells Avery all this is on him and says that should guide him as he contemplates his next move, and he leaves. So, I mean, I do kind of admit that this is kind of Avery's fault, what he did. I mean, if he wouldn't have had, if he would have focused more on Catherine and trusted her more, then this probably wouldn't have happened. But it's not all his fault. I mean, Raylan's making it seem like it's all his fault. It's not all his fault. It's partially his fault, but it's not all his fault like Raylan said it was. So, I thought that was really interesting. So, Raylan finds Earl hiding and asks if he's trying to get him shot. Raylan opens up the door and asks if he wants to testify against Avery, and Earl says he'd rather wait, put a gun in Avery's mouth later, because he wants to kill Avery, and Raylan says he's a dumbass and now he can take him in for the same thing. Earl says do it if he's going to. He says he'll drop him off and the locals can pick him up. He says he can drop him off and put him in protective custody. He asks how testifying sounds now, and Earl doesn't really care. He cares about Carl, because Carl was his only brother, and Raylan says to take his time and think about it, and I thought that was really sweet that Raylan let him do that. I mean, Raylan can be a real dick sometimes, and I'm happy that for once he actually let him do that, and he sits on the bench near the car, and Earl says he didn't hear anything about the plan for Ava and Boyd, and he says he remembers picture trucks and Groobs, and there was some man named Groobs, and Ava and Zachariah made it to Groob's cabin. Now, of course, we knew they were going there, but we find out that he's not answering because he's actually dead, and he's been dead for a while. How he died, we don't know, but I'm very interested in seeing how Groob's died, because we don't know yet. So Ava screams no. She's very upset that this happened, obviously. Boyd lurks in the cop car and follows a red truck, and then we see the very last scene. And this, honestly, this is setting up the last two episodes. And again, it's really sad to see, but this is ending. So Raylan lays his badge on the seat of the car, calls Art. He says he won't be back until he has Boyd, Ava, the money, or all three. And Raylan says he has no choice, and Art says he has 48 hours, and Raylan asks who he's sending after him. Art says everyone's out looking for Boyd, and then says he'll come for Raylan himself, and that's how the episode ends. So basically, Raylan has no choice but to go back to Art, because if he doesn't come to Art, Art's going to find whatever way to bring Raylan down, because he needs to talk to them, and he needs to do something about that. So I can't wait to see what happens there. But, oh my god, best episode of the season. Absolutely love this episode. Let's talk about Boyd. Boyd, it seems like now he's just going to do terrible things, and he's just going to make all these bad decisions, and all he's doing is making himself a bigger target for Raylan. All Raylan cares about is putting Boyd in jail. That's what he wants to do. He wants to put Boyd in jail, and wants to make sure that Boyd is arrested and behind bars. We all know this is going to lead to a final showdown between them, which I can't wait to see what happens there. And, in fact, Boyd talked about in this episode, but, why shouldn't they have a final showdown, and I thought that was awesome when we saw that. What's going to happen now with Avery and Zachariah? Now that they know that Groobs is dead, who killed Groobs? What's going to happen? I mean, it basically ruined their whole plan. So what's Ava going to do now? Is Ava going to ally with Boyd? Is she going to go back to Boyd? I really don't know what's going to happen there. And I like not knowing what happens because it's more intriguing that way. As far as Avery goes, what is Avery going to do? Is he going to get his revenge on Wynn? Is he going to listen to Raylan's advice? I don't know where Avery's headed right now, but I'm very interested in seeing what's going to happen there. Earl needs to listen to Raylan. I understand he needs to grieve over his brother, but he needs to listen to Raylan. We'll see what happens when that happens and everything. And what's gonna happen with Wynn? I mean, definitely I think he's gonna avenge Mikey's death. I mean, Mike said he'd avenge his death if he died, so I think Wynn's gonna avenge Mike's death, but we'll see what happens there. About this episode. Overall, guys, I love this episode. By far the best episode of the season. Such a crazy episode. It's so sad to say that the show is ending. It really is sad. I mean, it's been such an amazing season, and this season's been such a comeback for them, and of course it has to end. It's really sad, but it's now ending, and we have 2 episodes left, and it looks incredible. I gotta say that right now. It looks incredible. I cannot wait for next week's episode. I don't know exactly what's gonna happen, but I love not knowing what's gonna happen. It's more that's my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. Overall, as I said, best episode of the season. I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be my review for the season premiere of Finding Carter. So I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.